Life with Jahanzeb had always felt effortless. From the moment we met, everything clicked. Her laughter, the way she spoke with warmth in her eyes, the way we shared quiet mornings and easy silences. I'd always believed that kind of connection was rare, something meant to last. Our love felt like it was built on a solid foundation, a partnership where trust was unspoken but always present. But as the months passed, something began to shift. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel it in the space between us, in the way Jahanzeb started to pull away, just a little at first. Late nights at work, canceled plans, excuses that seemed too rehearsed. There was a distance in her eyes I hadn't seen before, a quietness in her smile that made me wonder if she was seeing someone else. One evening, she sent me a text. "I'll be late, traffic's awful." It was an innocent enough message, one that didn't raise any alarms. But something inside me stirred. I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, wondering when she'd be home. It wasn't just the text. It was the weight of everything that had been unsaid between us. As I sat there, waiting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept in the dark, like there was something she wasn't telling me. And then a single notification popped up on my screen. Her location. It was a simple ping, but it would change everything. She wasn't where she said she'd be. My heart dropped, and the world suddenly felt too quiet. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, and for the first time, I wasn't sure how much I still knew about the woman I had married. The ping of Jahanzeb's location on my phone was enough to make my heart race. I had told myself over and over that it was nothing, just another coincidence. But the more I looked at the map, the more my stomach churned. She wasn't at the office, as she claimed. She wasn't stuck in traffic. No, Jahanzeb's location showed her somewhere else entirely, somewhere I hadn't expected. A quiet street, a place she'd never mentioned before. My mind spiraled, each possibility worse than the last. I tried to shake off the unease. I told myself it was silly to jump to conclusions. After all, we had always had a strong bond. But as I sat there, the creeping feeling of doubt settled deeper in my chest. My mind replayed the little signs I'd ignored, the moments that, in hindsight, felt so out of place. The late nights she'd come home from work, the way her phone was always face down, the long hours she spent on calls with clients I never met. There was a night a few weeks ago when I had walked into our living room to find her texting someone with a look on her face I couldn't quite place, something between guilt and excitement. She had quickly hidden her phone, the flush on her cheeks too quick to be innocent. When I asked her about it, she dismissed me, telling me it was nothing. But now, as I stared at the map, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just the late nights or the unexplained absences. It was everything. The subtle shift in her behavior, the detachment in her gaze when she looked at me, as if I were a stranger she'd once known. The love we had shared seemed to slip through my fingers, like sand, and I hadn't even noticed until it was too late. I wanted to believe it was nothing. But deep down, I couldn't silence the voice that told me I was being lied to. The longer I stared at the screen, the more my pulse quickened. I had to know. I had to follow this feeling. This gut instinct that told me Jahanzeb wasn't who she seemed to be anymore. But how far was I willing to go to uncover the truth? The ping of Jahanzeb's location haunted me for days. Every time I glanced at my phone, I felt the gnawing need to know what was really going on. I tried to focus on work, to pretend that everything was normal, but I couldn't shake the growing suspicion that something was very wrong. I wasn't the jealous type, and I wasn't the kind of man who pried into his wife's private life. But this was different. This was her secrecy, her distance, and the unsettling feeling that had crept into our marriage like an unwelcome guest. I had to know. I couldn't let my mind spiral into wild accusations without first confirming what was really happening. So I started small. I began checking her location more often, tracking her on my phone. Every time she told me she was stuck in traffic or at a meeting, I checked. More often than not, she was in a place that didn't align with what she'd said. The office, the grocery store, the gym, all the places she claimed to be were nowhere near where her phone was. The irregularity was too much to ignore, and the more I checked, the clearer the pattern became. She wasn't where she said she was. One afternoon, I took a deep breath and decided to follow her. I knew it was a dangerous path, but the fear of being left in the dark outweighed the guilt. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't let it go. Jahan Zeb had just left for a meeting, but when I opened my phone, I saw she was miles away, in a quiet neighborhood that felt far too out of the way to be business. I waited until she was gone and slipped out of the house, trying to keep my footsteps light. My heart pounded in my chest, and my mind raced. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I might find, but I couldn't stop myself. I drove in the direction her location had taken her, my hands gripping the wheel tightly, the road stretching out ahead of me like a dark tunnel. As I approached the street she had been on, I slowed down, scanning the area. It was a residential neighborhood, calm and quiet, the kind of place I wouldn't expect to find her on a Tuesday afternoon. And then there was the car, her car, parked in front of a small, unassuming house. It wasn't much to look at, but in that moment, it felt like everything had changed. I parked down the street and stayed in the shadows, trying to keep my breathing steady. My pulse was racing, and I had to fight the urge to run up to the door and demand answers. I had to stay calm, I told myself. Stay in control. Minutes later, I saw the door open. Jahan Zeb stepped out of the house, laughing lightly with a man I didn't recognize. She seemed so carefree, so different from the woman I had come to know. I couldn't hear their conversation from where I was parked, but I could see the way they looked at each other. There was no mistaking the connection between them. It was the kind of look that made my stomach turn. She wasn't just spending time with a friend or a colleague. This wasn't a casual hangout. She was with him, and it was clear this wasn't their first meeting. I watched as Jahan Zeb hugged him before getting back into her car. She drove off with him, and I followed, my heart pounding in my throat. The drive felt endless, the streets twisting into unfamiliar places. Finally, they stopped at a small hotel on the outskirts of town, a place so far removed from our world that I couldn't even believe it. Jahan Zeb and the man got out of the car, laughing as they entered the hotel together, disappearing behind the sliding doors. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, my mind swirling with disbelief. It was happening. My wife, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, was having an affair. The woman who had promised to love me, to build a life with me, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her right then, to storm into that hotel and demand answers. But another part of me knew that this moment wasn't the time. I needed to think. I needed to process what I had seen. But deep down, I knew that everything had changed. The trust, the foundation we had built our relationship on, was gone. I sat there for a while longer, the weight of it sinking in. This wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. This was my reality now. I had been living a lie, and Jahan Zeb, she had been living one too. I hadn't expected it to feel like this. Confronting her wasn't supposed to be like stepping into the lion's den. Yet here I was, standing in the doorway of our living room, my hands trembling. The evidence I had gathered was clear, undeniable, but the weight of the moment made it hard to breathe. The air felt thick, charged, as though everything we had ever been was hanging in the balance. Jahan Zeb walked in, as she always did, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She smiled at me, tired but still managing to carry that faint hint of charm, as if nothing was wrong, as if everything was still the same. But I knew. I had seen enough. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I stood there, watching her as she made her way to the kitchen to put down her purse. She didn't notice the change in the air. She didn't see the storm brewing in my chest. It was as if she couldn't feel the earthquake that had just hit our marriage. "Hey," she said, turning to face me. "How was your day?" I took a slow breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk, Jahan Zeb." She frowned, a hint of confusion creeping into her eyes. "What's wrong? You're acting strange." The moment those words left her lips, something in me snapped. She was playing it off, playing me off, as though I hadn't just watched her walk into a hotel with another man, as if I hadn't seen the way her lips touched his, the way she laughed with him in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. "I know about the affair, Jahan Zeb." Her face fell, a flash of panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a defensive calm. She opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't having it. I stepped forward, pulling out my phone and showed her the photos, the timestamps, the evidence of every lie she told me. You've been seeing him for months. Don't try to deny it, I said, my voice low but steady. Her eyes darted to the screen, then back to me. The shock was gone now, replaced by something else. Guilt, maybe, or was it just self-preservation? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered, her voice wavering. I never meant for it to get this far. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. The words she was saying sounded like rehearsed lines, a weak attempt to justify everything. I didn't want to hurt you. Those words were hollow. They meant nothing when you betrayed the very person you promised to love forever. You don't want to hurt me? I repeated, stepping closer. Then why did you do it, Jehanzeb? Why did you throw away everything we had for him? She looked down, the weight of my words pressing against her. Her face twisted in a mixture of shame and regret, but she still couldn't meet my eyes. It felt like she was still trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make herself the victim in the story. I don't know, she finally muttered. Things changed between us. We were drifting apart, and he made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted, like I mattered. A laugh escaped my lips, though there was no humor in it. You needed someone else to make you feel alive? What about me, Jehanzeb? What about us? I shook my head, the disbelief sinking deeper. What happened to the woman I married? What happened to the life we built together? Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt a pang of sympathy, just a pang. But it quickly faded, replaced by the bitter reality of what had been stolen from me. She hadn't just betrayed me physically. She had discarded everything we'd shared, everything we'd fought for the thrill of a fleeting affair. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never meant for it to go this far. I love you, I really do. But her words fell flat. How could I believe her now? How could I trust anything she said after all the lies, the secrets, and the coldness she'd shown me? I could see it now, the way she'd pushed me out of her heart, bit by bit, until there was nothing left of the woman I thought I knew. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Jehanzeb, I said, my voice cracking with the weight of it all. I don't know if we can go back after this. I don't even know who you are anymore. She opened her mouth, her hands trembling as if reaching for some last shred of hope to salvage what we had. But it was too late. The trust had been shattered, and no apology could repair the damage she had done. I turned away, feeling the air between us grow colder, heavier. The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of words. It was the end of everything we once had. There was no going back. The silence after the confrontation was suffocating. Jehanzeb stood there, frozen, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and regret. But I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her, not after everything. The anger inside me was too raw, too sharp. It burned like a fire that refused to be extinguished, even by the tears that threatened to spill for her eyes. I never meant to hurt you, she repeated, over and over again, as if those words could erase what had already been done. But I knew better now. Words were nothing. They were empty, hollow. The damage had been done, and there was no taking it back. I walked past her, my footsteps loud against the hardwood floor, each step carrying the weight of truth between us. Every time I glanced at her, I saw not the woman I loved, but a stranger who had deceived me, who had betrayed the very core of what we had built together. I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had promised to be there forever, had vanished. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who had chosen someone else over me. Jehanzeb tried to follow me, to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I didn't want her explanations anymore. I didn't want her justifications. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything. It was the lies, the cold distance, the way she'd slowly pulled away from me until there was nothing left to hold on to. I need space, I said, my voice firm but broken. I need to think. We both do. I didn't wait for her response. I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, alone in a house that had once felt like a home. The weight of the silence that followed her words, the unspoken truths, was too much to bear. It felt as though everything I had known, everything I had trusted, was being ripped away from me. That night, I stayed with a friend, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. I saw the life we had slipping further away, out of my grasp. I couldn't erase the image of her laughing with him, touching him with the same tenderness that was once mine. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair. It was about how easily she had walked away from everything we had, how disposable I had become to her. The next few days were a blur of numbness. I couldn't bring myself to face Jahan Zeb again, couldn't bring myself to look her in the eye. Every time I thought about her, the pain felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to forgive her, or if I even wanted to. But what hurt most of all wasn't just the affair. It was a realization that, somewhere along the way, Jahan Zeb had stopped loving me. I had been blindsided by it, and now I was left picking up the pieces of a life I no longer recognized. The days that followed were a blur of numbness. I couldn't escape the weight of the betrayal, but I also couldn't bring myself to dwell in the past forever. At some point, I had to make a choice: stay trapped in the suffocating pain of what Jahan Zeb had done, or find a way to move forward, even if it meant leaving everything behind. I spent the first few days in a haze, not knowing where to go or what to do with myself. I avoided our home, unsure of how to walk through the door that had once been filled with love and laughter, now tainted with the ghosts of her lies. But slowly, I began to reclaim pieces of my life. I started spending more time with friends I hadn't seen in a while. People who knew me before Jahan Zeb, before the life we'd built together. They reminded me of who I was outside of our marriage, of the person I had almost forgotten in the wake of my heartache. I also threw myself into work, pouring my energy into projects that had been neglected during the months of uncertainty. In some ways, work became my refuge, a place where I could focus on something tangible, something I could control. It gave me structure, purpose. But the most important thing I did was let go. I knew I had to release the anger, the hurt, and the resentment that had consumed me. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet at least, but about freeing myself from the hold that Jahan Zeb still had over me, even if she wasn't in my life anymore. I didn't need closure from her. I needed to find peace within myself. And little by little, I did. The future was no longer a dark, uncertain place. It was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally beginning to breathe again. Looking back, I can see how much I had lost before I realized it. The trust, the love, the connection I had once shared with Jahan Zeb. Those things were gone long before the affair. The betrayal was just a final nail in a coffin that had been slowly closing for months. But in losing her, I found something I hadn't realized I'd been missing: myself. The anger that had burned so fiercely in the beginning started to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. It wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but I knew now that I didn't need her to complete me. I had spent so long building my life around someone else's happiness that I had forgotten about my own. Jahan Zeb's absence, her betrayal, forced me to look inward, to rebuild my life from the ground up. I'm not the same man I was when I first confronted her, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm stronger, wiser, and more aware of my worth than I've ever been. The future is uncertain, but it's mine to navigate. I'll take it one step at a time, knowing that no matter what, I've learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what truly matters.